How many Southern California people do we have here? All right, lots of locals or near locals. How many California in general? All right. So this is going to be local for most of you. We're going to be talking about the California Consumer Privacy Act. Just another quick show of hands. How many have heard about the California Consumer Privacy Act? All right. So January 1 of this year, a new law went into effect in the state of California. And if you can see fine print down at the bottom of this news site, it says, "Do not sell my data." If you click through, you usually get forms like this that says Privacy Manager. So what does Privacy Manager do? Is it just another boring set of information that companies have to give you, like the GDPR in Europe or whatever the other privacy law in California was that made everyone put a boilerplate privacy policy on their site? Is CCPA just a piece of paperwork that sites have to do? And so far, in a lot of cases, that's been it. CCPA, as a person in California, it gives you 3 basic rights. One is you can ask companies not to sell your information. Another is you can ask companies for access to your information. And finally, you can ask companies to delete your information. Now, of course, there are a lot of exceptions to these. When there's some other law that has requirements about your personal information, like the Fair Credit Reporting Act or HIPAA for your health information, then California Consumer Privacy Act probably doesn't apply to those. Has anyone tried to use any of your rights under CCPA? All right. All right, we're gonna go through some of those steps right now. But first, let's talk about it from the company side. If you're running a company and dealing with people in the state of California, even if you're not based in California, who has to comply? According to the law, any company with $25 million or more in annual revenue, 50,000 records of personal information, or a company that earns half its revenue selling personal data, those are the companies that currently have to comply with CCPA. So that's the way it's written. In reality, the Attorney General's office in the state of California has about enough people and about enough budget to bring somewhere between 3 and 12 CCPA cases. So in reality, the companies that have to comply with CCPA is the top 3 creepy, famous companies in the state of California. So in practice, they're going to pick out some stalkerware, spouseware, spyware, some company that's listening to you on the microphone when they say they're not listening to you. They're gonna make show of enforcement for those. But for now, we're not going to see a lot of enforcement coming down on regular companies. So go through the normal process and add the link to your site. It can just be an email link, and you're probably going to be fine on compliance. I am not a lawyer. If you have $25 million worth of other people's data, you can get a lawyer, and they'll tell you the same thing. All right. So a little bit of history about how the CCPA came to be. It was originally a ballot proposition put forward by a prominent advocate named Alistair McTaggart. He agreed to withdraw his ballot proposition if the state legislature would put through roughly the same thing as a state law. So CCPA got passed, And wow, it's the law now. Everyone's going to start complying with it. Well, no. Everybody in the marketing business, advertising business, pretty much figured, well, Congress is going to pass some kind of a super basic minimal privacy law. They're going to preempt California, so we don't have to do CCPA. It's kind of like everybody was expecting there's going to be a school day. Everybody's expecting there's going to be a snow day from school, so nobody really did their homework. It turns out that Congress, because reasons, ended up not passing a federal privacy law last year. So on January 1st of this year, California Consumer Privacy Act actually went into effect. And what that meant is that everyone's implementation of CCPA on their website was real rough. So we ended up with the quick and dirty, how do we get minimal compliance with the CCPA working? And that is what we're seeing with the Interactive Advertising Bureau, IAB CCPA framework. Good news, real simple standard, real simple thing to observe and possibly change in your web browsing experience. So, any questions so far on background for CCPA? All right, great. I welcome questions during the talk, so please stick your hand up and I'll get to you. I can come down with the mic so that we can get questions onto the recording. So let me know. Yes, question. Hold on a second.
I was just going to suggest you mention what the IAB is.
Yes, IAB is the Interactive Advertising Bureau. And this is a really interesting organization. They started out representing the interests of the core players in internet advertising, right? The publishers and the people who really benefit from advertising one way or the other. And I'm trying to remember when this was, maybe about 10 years ago, they started letting the AdTech firms in. So now the IAB is this really, really weird organization because they've got on one side the publishers who benefit from particular high-value brand-building advertising activities. And then they've also got, somehow under the same tent, they've got all the AdTech vendors. So it's a constant tension between which kind of advertising this organization is really for, and it must be a huge, huge challenge for them to run. But they do come out with technical standards for complying with privacy laws, like GDPR when that came out in Europe in May 2018, and then now for CCPA in the US. And it's funny that they're calling it US privacy, because they're expecting there to be more state privacy laws. The one in Washington state looks really interesting. Anyone here from Washington? Okay. All right. So if you fire up your web browser and look in your JavaScript console, you can see that on a lot of publisher sites now, there's this thing called __USP API. And this is the US Privacy API that you can call from JavaScript. You can actually call it from any JavaScript on the page. You can call it from JavaScript in a web extension if you inject it into the page. So what I was actually hoping to be able to do for this talk is, hey, let's inject some JavaScript into the page. We'll flip all our CCPA bits to the right value, so we don't have to go through and click all those do not sell requests. I thought that would be awesome. I put it in for a talk for scale, and since the deadline was quite a while ago before CCPA went into effect, I thought, yeah, I'm going to tweak these privacy bits. I'm going to show the awesome privacy experience. And what I'm going to get into now is why I ended up pulling on a piece of a much harder problem than I thought I was pulling on. All right, so you call USP API from JavaScript, and this is my code here, calling USP API. This is based on their example code. And I say, get USP data, and then of course I give it a JavaScript callback, and so I can get back my USP data, or if I don't get that success bit coming back from my USP API, then I can say US privacy fail. And what I get back from USP API is version 1, USP string 1 YNN. Okay. Anyone familiar with the transparency and consent framework for GDPR in Europe? That's the European version of this is designed to comply with the European GDPR, and their consent strings are way longer because they've got a lot more legal requirements that were a lot better spec'd out. This is a super simple string, and we can interpret it pretty easily. In the IAB's US privacy string, the number 1 is just a version. This is version 1. Has explicit notice been provided? So has the site on which this USP API appeared given me some notice of my California rights? And in this case, they're claiming, yes, we notified you of your California rights. Number 3, has the user opted out of sale of personal information? No, I haven't opted out. And number 4, publisher is a signatory to the IAB Limited Service Publisher Agreement, and the publisher declares the transaction is covered as a covered opt-out transaction or a non-opt-out transaction as those terms are defined in the agreement. Now, this is an agreement a model agreement that the IAB is trying to push through to try to weasel out of some of the requirements of the CCPA, and it's still an open question among privacy lawyers as to what even a, quote, sale means under CCPA. So this is going to take a while to sort out. The big problem here, as I originally saw it last fall before CCPA actually went into effect, the big problem here is that letter N has the user opted out. It all looks good, except I want to make a Y there. So, and this is basically what I intended to do with this talk, is, hey, I'll make my own USP API, right? I'll inject that into the page in my web extension. I'll come back with not 1 YNN. I'll come back with 1 YYN, and I tell every piece of third-party JavaScript code on this page that's checking US privacy, I tell every third-party tracker, yes, I'm opted out. I am one of the rare Californians who's actually gone through and clicked, do not sell my personal information, only I get JavaScript code to do that for free. So I thought that was a pretty good idea. So yes, let me bring you the mic.
Wouldn't it be a lot easier just to go to the IAB and opt out?
If I go to the IAB and opt out, there are sites that pretend to offer a cross AdTech opt-out, right? Like my privacy choices, the little arrow thing at the upper right corner of web ads where you can click through and hit the multi AdTech vendor site that does opt-outs. The problem with that thing is they've got like 100-some companies participating, and there are over 1,000 third-party trackers that you regularly run into on the top 1,000,000 sites that you visit. So realistically, you can hit a cross-industry opt-out, and even if you're running something that preserves that opt-out across your third-party cookies getting deleted, you're still not going to hit as many of the third parties as you need to hit to actually get opt-out. Does that answer the question?
Well, assuming that they're all using the US, I'll just speak one
Yeah, okay.
repeat the question.
Yeah.
Assuming that these websites are calling USP API,
Yes?
right? They have to get that code from some place. And ideally that would be the IAB.
Right, but they're calling a USP API that lives on the page. So the IAB standard says that USP API has to be there in advance of those third parties. So it would be, I think I can figure out how it would be better to be designed the way you're describing it, but the way it's actually designed is that they make the publishers stick this USP API onto the page early on. So this is JavaScript on the page that's letting all the third parties know whether or not the user in this session is opted out or not.
Right, but, okay, so I'm going to take this one step further, which is if you actually have not opted out, an active click, when you say, yes, I've opted out here, you actually haven't done it. And so is that legally enforceable at that point? And I'm just picking holes in your scheme of trying to get around this. But I agree. Selecting opt-out is probably the thing you want to do. But legally, if you don't actively click opt-out and you're just saying, yeah, I signed the contract. Signed the contract, right.
Yeah, that's a good point that is specifically addressed in the regulations that the Attorney General's office has put forward on CCPA. And so the Attorney General's regulations say that if the user has made some kind of a setting in their browser by user choice, then that has to be respected as a do not sell signal. So if a browser just shipped code that overwrote USP API for all the users, then that would probably be a problem because it's not a clear indication of the user's preference. But if the user deliberately turns on some kind of a privacy tool to override USP API, then the Attorney General says you must respect that. All right, so this looks cool. This was going to be my JavaScript talk, and at this point I was going to bring up a web browser and say, hey, check it out. We're all in privacy mode. We're all safe. We're all good. And then we could have turned into a discussion of the finer points of JavaScript, building a web extension for multiple browsers, all that kind of fun stuff that would have gone over really well at scale. But unfortunately, here's a web ad. Now, the advertising you see when you go to almost any website now that has advertising on it That advertising is the result of a real-time auction. And in that auction, different ad campaigns bid for the slot to reach you. So, you might be looking at a My Little Pony site, and you see an ad for a Lexus, because there's some third-party tracker that has seen you also went to Car and Driver. So every ad that comes up is the result of a lot of code from a lot of different players deciding how much money do I want to spend to get in front of this person. The problem, if you decide to become a privacy nerd, is you start getting ads like this. The problem with saying, don't use my personal information, is, guess what? There's a lot of people out there who are willing to share their personal information. And the ad campaigns that spend money on professionally shot photos and professional layout are also spending money to bid to get in front of desirable audiences. If they see they don't have the right to figure out if I'm a member of one of those audiences, then that professionally shot photo of a Lexus driving down a scenic highway that I might have gotten and not so much objected to, that campaign doesn't show up for me. What I do get is super cheap ads. And I'd like to point this one out to you because it's one of, it's a good example of what they call ad arbitrage. See who the advertiser is? Yahoo. The advertiser for this ad is Yahoo Search. But this is a display ad. This is a square ad that shows up on an article. So what's going on here is Yahoo is selling search ads, which of course get a lot of money per click. And then they're getting a lot of traffic to those search results pages by placing display ads. Now this arbitrage model only works if they can buy low and sell high. In this case, they're selling high because they've got some advertisers buying keywords related to Crohn's disease. It's a medical search. It's something where they can sell the miracle colloidal silver solution that's going to cure Crohn's disease and whoever knows what else. Those advertisers are making big money. They're bidding high. They're giving Yahoo a lot of money to show up on that search results page. So Yahoo can turn around and buy display ads. Where do those display ads go up? Where do those display ads show up? Those display ads show up for random people who are opted out of seeing the higher quality ads. Here's an Outbrain opt-out page. And when I was looking at this, I realized, hey, wait a minute. I run Firefox. I run the cookie auto-delete web extension. I'm already not getting tracked by Outbrain. I don't need to go opt out of Outbrain because my technology already handles it. So the best place for me to deal with privacy problems is just something that works by default in the browser. I don't have to worry about it at all. Second best is it's something that I install as a browser extension. And then third best is something I have to do manually. In the case of Outbrain, it's already handled by Firefox. I don't have to worry about it. So I shouldn't be wasting my valuable time on opt-outs that affect things I'm already protected from. So where do I need to focus my CCPA do not sell access and deletion requests? Where I do need to focus is people who have information on me that I can't influence in the page in the browser. Credit reporting agencies. You can do CCPA opt-outs on the marketing side of credit reporting agencies without dealing with your actual credit report. These have a huge amount of data. They're a high impact place to opt out of. Creepy data brokers. These, you probably haven't heard of them, but I will show you in a few minutes how to find them and opt out of them. Axiom, Epsilon, LiveRamp, Oracle Data Cloud. Finally, any company that might have sensitive info on you, particular brands that you might have had a customer service relationship with where you share some sensitive aspect of your family life or your personal habits. And then any company where you're actually using their single sign-on, if you're clicking sign in with example.com, those, you want to get them with the do not sell, obviously, but you can't really get them to delete your information because you still want the single sign-on to work. Now, who wasn't on that list? Facebook. And if you get one thing out of this talk, I'd like you to think about the hashtag Undelete Facebook. Because, for now, getting back into your old Facebook account, if you still have one, is the best way to spot companies that are doing privacy intrusive practices on you. This is just for now, given the status of what you have access to in Facebook today. Of course, it could change. The other reason why you don't want to worry about doing opt-outs with Facebook is right now, Facebook management has asserted they don't really have to follow CCPA, so you'd be buying yourself more of a beef than the actual impact at this point.
Why don't they think that?
Because they have very expensive lawyers, and the California Attorney General's office is understaffed for this stuff.
Let's never stop government from bringing action.
Well, at the second to last slide, I'll have an update on what's going on with that. Okay, who has gone in and looked at your Facebook information or your Facebook ad settings? Okay. This is buried treasure. Not because Facebook will do anything if you click on anything here. Consider this a pure read-only medium, but this is your main CCPA intelligence gathering tool in a lot of cases. Your off-Facebook activity, also known as companies that chose to send your personal information to the world's creepiest PHP programmer for some reason. In my case, Office Depot. I bought a case of printer paper from Office Depot. The very next business day, they show up in off-Facebook activity. Office Depot ratted me out to Facebook. Microsoft CDC and Airbnb, I didn't really do business with either real Microsoft or real Airbnb. So those are probably just scam companies using a real brand, but the Office Depot one was likely real. So Office Depot now presents itself as a high concern place where I need to get my CCPA opt-outs done. Okay, there's another Facebook page which is under advertising, and if you click on businesses under advertising, you will see LiveRamp. LiveRamp is a big data broker. They have a lot of information on a lot of people. You will also see companies that you actually do business with. In my case, there's United. There's another data broker, Axiom. And Waste Shaper Company? Nope. They have no reason to actually have my personal info. Steelhouse? No, they have no reason to have my personal info. Some of these companies are companies that actually have my personal information because I actually did business with them. Some of them are data brokers that got my information some other way. And some of them probably just found an old spam CD behind the file cabinet. There's no way of telling where these companies got my information. But just to keep an open mind on Facebook and drill down into especially your off-Facebook activity, you'll find companies that have leaked your information. And if they're leaking it to Facebook, they're going to leak it to other places. All right, so I just showed you a slide that included United Airlines, and last I checked, United did not even have their CCPA button or do not sell link installed on their homepage. So if you want to do an opt-out and sites don't have a CCPA button, well, according to the regulations, if a consumer submits a request in a manner that is not one of the designated methods of submission, basically, if you send in your request in the wrong method, they have to come back and tell you what the right method is or honor it anyway. So what I've found is that by sending an email to their privacy contact email address, I can generally kick off a pretty fast, pretty productive CCPA process. The catch, though, is sending that hash object does is take my CCPA letter, hash it, and stick it into the X header. So it's really easy for me to keep track of which versions of my CCPA letter I sent to which companies. So that's the headers, and now chop off the front matter from my boilerplate letter. And now I'm going to run MUT with the option of not using my regular signature, because I don't want to confuse them. I just want to give them a straightforward letter of what I'm demanding that they do under CCPA. I'm going to run MUT, no signature, -H temp file is I'm using that temp file as my outgoing mail. And so I can look at it in MUT, and I can add CCs, or I can change the letter around a little bit. But normally what I just do is ccpaexample.com, the letter comes up in MUT, and I just send it out from MUT. Super fast. You can CCPA a company just as fast as you can cut and paste their email address. But there's still a problem. There's still a problem that as a person who puts a lot of time and effort into privacy stuff, I'm not helping myself all that much for the amount of work that I put in. If we were all getting as much out of privacy work as we put into it, well, then there'd be a lot more privacy work going on. People have done some really positive steps in let's get me protected. And we've seen that with browser protection tools like Apple Safari's ITP, Firefox ETP, now Microsoft Edge has tracking protection, Google Chrome's finally going to do it. We've seen a lot of positive progress on the technical side, but we're really putting in a lot more effort than we're getting out of it. We're kind of paving over or painting over a problem rather than trying to attack it upstream. And usually in open source, you want to work upstream. You want to figure out where is all this problem coming from? How can I make things work better for everybody rather than constant rain of new surveillance marketing crap and constant churning of trying to opt out of it. So if we want to think about where the money comes from, of course it comes from marketing budgets. And marketing budgets are allocated across paying for context, which can be, in a typical example, some kind of ad-supported news or cultural work. It can be some kind of a resource like a bus bench. Marketing money also goes to support services like search and directory services. And finally, some marketing money goes into supporting surveillance and targeting. And it's not a pure split. Of course, some campaigns will allocate a certain amount of money toward paying for context. Some of it is spent in paying for audience data. So it's a mix. But fundamentally, ad money is split across those three places. And ad-supported news and culture, the money that went into Collier's magazine advertising back when Kurt Vonnegut was writing short stories, well, that money has positive externalities even today. Those stories are still out there. All the Star Trek episodes that were paid for by TV advertisers in the 60s are still out there. So there's positive externalities of ad-supported content. And ad-supported content carries an economic signal. It shows that the advertiser is willing to pay money to invest in promoting their brand. I want more ad-supported content. Search and directory services, of course, those are positive sum. I like Google Maps as much as anybody. We were just walking from the convention center, or walking from the hotel to the convention center, and we decided, hey, we want to get brunch. We did a search. We found a great place. We got some food. Search and directory services are awesome. and I'm happy that marketing money pays for them. Targeting, on the other hand, targeting has all negative externalities, and it's a negative-sum game. Every time my name is in some marketing database somewhere, I'm taking some risks of a data breach. I'm taking the risk that my information is going to be used for political information. And, of course, I'm taking the risk that money that could have been spent on content or services for me is going to some data broker who has my information. It's a big lose when my information's out there, but marketers won't reallocate across those 3 ways to spend ad money until they see more people protected. Protection is not just something that you do for yourself. Protection from surveillance marketing, from targeting, is a public good. And public goods are underproduced. We don't have the market design in place to incentivize people to produce as much of public goods as we would choose for them to produce. And the result of underproduction of this public good, of privacy protection, is we're facing crappy ads and security risks. We want users to get a better deal. We want publishers to get more money to support content. And we want to reduce the malware impact on users. Malware is conveyed through third-party tracking. And we want to address some of the political concerns around targeting. But we saw that each individual opt-out, or each individual privacy protection step, is a very small thing for an individual to do. Anybody recognize this plant? Okay. This is a plant called Arabidopsis thaliana. And the fun thing about this plant is it's small, it's cute, it grows fast, it's easy to raise in a greenhouse. You can do all kinds of fun science on this thing that later applies to crop plants. So you don't have to have a cornfield, a wheat field. You can do agricultural research and botany research on these little plants, and then later apply that to the big complicated fields. So our CCPA opt-outs are like the Arabidopsis thaliana of public goods. It's something where we can experiment with how do we get people opted out. And the question of how do we get people opted out is related to the question of how do we get people to participate in creating any public good anywhere. It's a laboratory. And we can address the problem anywhere along the surveillance marketing kill chain. The process of surveillance marketing has to hang together across multiple steps. They have to identify who you are. They have to, thanks to GDPR and CCPA, they have to check that they have the legal right to use your information. They have to deliver some kind of a payload, ad, call to action, whatever you want to call it, email, spam, malware. They have to deliver the payload, and they have to attribute the results. They have to know that the surveillance targeting thing that they did was effective. You break the surveillance marketing kill chain anywhere along the line, and you've disincentivized investment into that category of marketing. So how do we do this? Well, can we apply market mechanisms? Here's a novel market design for trading futures contracts based on bugs in a bug tracker. Oh, can we gamify it? Here's a game called California Privacy Wizard, where you do opt-outs, and each opt-out you do gets you new spells that you can use to have wizard duels against other players. But all these methods that we might try for getting people to opt out, don't we still have the inexorable force of all the capital in the world bearing down on people's privacy? Isn't there huge amounts of money being invested in surveillance marketing? Is surveillance marketing a dystopia, the Terminator? Personally, I don't think so. Marketing budgets and venture capital investments are subject to fads. When the Digital Millennium Copyright Act came out, a bunch of companies that were pitching for investments to venture capitalists stopped getting their calls returned. Why? Because those venture capitalists were deterred from investing in anything related to media sharing, home jukebox, home media network. All that stuff is blocked off by the DMCA's more market power for the copyright holder, less market power for the device manufacturer. So there's a time lag between investment in privacy and shift in marketing spend. And we can move marketing money out of surveillance by creating those incentives to participate in public goods. And this is the answer to what's coming next. This is the latest California Privacy Rights and Enforcement Act of 2020, also known as CCPA 2.0. This will give the people of California a new privacy enforcement agency that gets a new budget, semi-independent of the Attorney General, so they get to bring more cases and do more stuff. The question for technologists now is, this is the trend, how can we take advantage of it, and how can we learn from privacy to build more public goods in the future? And there's my Creative Commons photo credit, and any questions?
So there's some people who famously, like Leo Laporte, say ads are good. I want ads that are relevant to me. I want to know about these products. I'm getting free stuff from these companies, free services. And he's somebody who, and he and others are people who normally admonish anything that looks devious in the tech industry. So how do you explain that sort of bipolar view of the world and its impact on CCPA and other regulations?
I'm glad you asked. The question is, some people really like ads, and I have to say I am one of the last few advertising optimists out there as well. I was at one conference on the future of business models for journalism, and a bunch of business models were brought up: subscriptions, events, merchandising, apparel, cosmetics. How many speakers were talking about advertising as a way to fund the future of journalism? This guy. What is it about the way we structure advertising today that makes it so terrible for supporting journalism and public goods? What is it that made magazines on print able to pay writers more than they're getting now on the web? How's technology pushed advertising backward so far? Advertising business models worked better when they were designed by people who were breathing fumes from molten lead all day. So there's a a tremendous amount of potential in advertising as a way to support content, we are letting most of that money waste away and go support targeting and privacy intrusion, when we should be able to redirect it back to support ad-supported services and ad-supported content. All right, yes?
Never going to happen.
Never going to happen. Okay.
Well, ATP already does that.
Okay, hold on a second. Let's get somebody new.
Oh, I was just going to say that the ATP podcast already sells their own ads. They don't require selling any of their users' data. So it can happen.
Yes, it can happen. There are pure contextual targeted ads. There are ads that are targeted based on permission-based subscriber lists by individual publishers. So we're seeing right now a lot of publishers saying, well, what are we going to do now that Chrome is killing the third-party cookie? Well, that's kind of a 2-year window and invitation to experiment with new models and with taking some of the ad systems that have been really successful in podcasting and applying those to other media.
The marketers like the targeting because it gives them metrics that they don't otherwise get from contextual marketing. It's just intoxicating to them, I think. I think that's just, it's really, really motivating.
Yep, that's true. That's true. Every marketing department, and I've worked in marketing departments, every marketing department has exactly 2 jobs. One of them, sell stuff to customers. The other job, sell marketing to companies' management. Now, if you're putting up those numbers that directly attribute sales to particular marketing activities, that makes that second job a hell of a lot easier. So part of the challenge here is looking at some of our niche audiences where there are a lot of privacy nerds already, and say, hey, I used to work for a NoSQL database company, and 60% of the people there were invisible to Google Analytics even. So if you have a niche that's highly populated with privacy nerds, how do you reach that niche? And especially in a valuable niche like DevOps, what can you do? And then once you've got that niche, how do you build out from it? Yeah, just a minute.
It seems to me that if you're trying to reach people that are trying to be off the grid, you want to reach their influencers. And so, like he's talking about Leo Laporte being a possible influencer, you'd have to get other influencers on board with your point of view and get them to broadcast it for you. Hopefully the people that are listening to them that would be otherwise unreachable.
Yes, exactly. And that's why we have kind of an informal network of people at ad agencies, at publishers and publisher organizations, and brands that are thinking about this problem and thinking about privacy as not just, oh no, where's all my user data going to go and how am I going to show my ad spend works, but thinking about how to redesign some of those market mechanisms. And I hate to say it because it's a big company that does targeting, but a lot of that discussion is actively happening on Twitter. So if you follow me on there and check my Twitter list for brand advertising online, there are a lot of people who are making some really, really interesting progress in this area. More questions? All right, well, thank you all for coming out, and please come see me at the rest of the event if you have any more questions that occur to you, and thanks again.